Thank you very much. I think the picnic thought is to share that sense of optimism that we can have all this and use it and create new things. And actually we have some responsibility in creating new things. I'd like to invite Shirky to the stage, who is, like Charlie, writing, thinking about all these developments and engage the two gentlemen in a conversation. Clay is also speaking tomorrow morning. So this is actually not a talk, but a conversation. And gentlemen, if you want to take questions from the room, just let me know.
So one utopian cretin to another. I think your final question about does this break down or does it not? Is this sort of a flowering moment? Is this another sort of white bicycles and we're just waiting for the bikes to get thrown in the canals and life to go back to the way it was? There seems to me to be a middle point that I want to ask you about, and it gets to your, the negative comment on YouTube, right? Which is because it's a social environment, there's a governance structure we need, right? You can't just have anarchy, as Jimmy was saying about Wikipedia. So where doesn't this work?
Where doesn't it work?
Where doesn't this kind of collaborative, bottom-up, self-assembly, some kind of emergent sense of creativity, where is that a bad idea? Where doesn't that fit?
Well, I mean, I suppose it may well not work when there are big asymmetries of knowledge, where you might want someone to be an expert because actually, if you're having a hernia operation, you don't want it done by someone who read about the procedure on Wikipedia. Right. So that's one place where it doesn't work. It may not work where you've got really complicated and risky activities where you need sort of tighter regulation, I suppose. I mean, the financial markets,
Funny you should mention that.
One of the lessons might be that actually too much self-organization gets out of hand with the wrong incentives and creates downsides. And the third thing, of course, is there are some activities which still require heavy capital costs. So there might be some ways in which those situations where it doesn't work. And there might be things which are purely individual still, where there is a kind of real individual spark. But actually, my fundamental feeling is that so much of creativity in any walk is now collaborative, right, that actually this has such wide potential and application. We've only just begun to scratch the surface.
Yeah, no question. I used to be a utopian. Now I'm merely an optimist because I've seen some of the negative effects as well. But I think what Ron Burt calls the social origin of good ideas is a large and growing theme. But when I look at some of these systems, because I'm kind of a governance geek, I'm sort of obsessed with the ways that groups of people self-regulate and all agree to be part of a group, even if they don't get their way all the time. I feel like I could write an article today, and I just would have to write the headline. It would be the 7 hottest babes in science fiction movies, and I would be on the front page of Dig like that. Right? Because it's just an official Dig-style title. It's got a number in it, it's got the promise of some not safe for work images, and it's got science fiction in the title. And I don't need to know what the voting algorithm is. I don't need to know who's looking at it. The Dig system seems to be so gameable, right, that in a way you don't have to posit the external forces of corporatism coming back and right, clawing this stuff back. And what I wonder is, I mean, there's plainly good systems and bad systems for harnessing the energy of the crowd in one way or another. And what are you seeing between entirely within the domain of collaborative creativity? What are you seeing that works and doesn't work? Because I think in a way our thesis is on the rise, and we got to start sorting out within that world.
Yeah. So that I completely agree with that point. There's a really important starting point. We have to work out how to do stuff with this rather than just saying it's a kind of nice and appealing idea. And there's a kind of real thirst to put a name to it and to try and work out some principles. I think it works when it makes sense to distribute tasks, when tasks can be broken down in particular ways, and when you can create tools for people to contribute which are easy to use, and when there are often quite good peer-to-peer ways of assessing quality, so you don't have to go back to the centre the whole time to do that. And when there's challenge in the system, there's got to be challenge. So part of the problem, I think, with your dig example, gaming, is that it's kind of difficult to challenge, isn't it? Because that's the kind of prevailing wisdom. It's kind of, you want to be part of that community, you believe in those things. And one of the dangers of the internet is this kind of people agreeing with other people and just, you know, occupying the same spaces and not really being open to diverse challenges. Right. So I think what my hope, I suppose, is that we're in a continual process now of trying to learn how these things work. How can you do it better in this kind of odd middle ground, which is somewhere between sort of little individual endeavour and big corporate control, I suppose.
Yeah, when I am going around talking about this stuff, people often ask me for the recipe, right? How do you, you know, what are the 5 steps to getting this to work or whatever? And the only response that I've been able to, you know, frame acceptably is that this stuff is more like the physics of weather than it is like the physics of gravity. We know all the inputs, and still about the best we can do is say, looks like rain, right? That is the kind of effort that might work out. Yes, you've got a wiki. Yes, you've got a passionate group of people. Yes, you may be able to get some convergent work going on. But there is no check these boxes and you will succeed. Although I think we all have got a lot of examples of check these boxes and you will fail. Yeah. We've done a better job of saying, past these edges, you fall off the cliff. And you know, right now it's a little bit this sort of, I don't know, butterfly hunting stage. Like, oh, I just caught something really, you know, here's a really beautiful story.
So it's Karl Popper, the philosopher of science, had this distinction between clouds and clocks. That there were clock problems which were complicated and had lots of moving parts, but eventually you could fit them together. And there were cloud problems, and clouds you can't even get your hand around. And the kind of issues that we're dealing with seem at the moment more like clouds. And clouds can be understood, and they are formed in a systematic way, but they are more like clouds than clocks. And so one of the big challenges then is, what does it take? Does it take just special individuals like Jimmy Wales and Linus Torvalds with special kind of capacities to get these things going? I mean, what's your view on that, Clay? Are we heavily dependent on a few highly voluntaristic people to create these public goods?
Yes, absolutely, immeasurably, yes. And in fact, sort of the first thing I published in this, the first sort of thing I went public with in this area was a study of the weblog world, which showed just from the numbers that were publicly available that weblog traffic, link structure, all of this obeyed a power law distribution where there were a handful of highly connected individuals, and then this long flat tail of people who had, you know, an audience of a dozen or less, or had very weak link structure. And it was this small group of people who held the whole thing together. That's also what contributions to the Linux kernel looks like. It's what contributions to any given Wikipedia article look like. So I had this image the other day trying to describe this. When I was 16 and my parents sent me to New York for the first time from a incredibly boring town in the Midwest, New York was a revelation to me in all kinds of ways, as you can imagine. But the thing that really got me was pizza by the slice. I'd never seen any place where you could buy a slice of pizza. I worked in a pizza joint, in fact, where I was growing up. You had to buy the whole pie. And pizza by the slice meant that even though you can't predict who's going to want pizza in advance, enough people want it that you can make the pie and sell it in these smaller chunks, to your point about subdividing work. And in a way, the Wikipedia problem is a pizza by the slice problem, right? There is some group of people who care enormously that the article on Pluto be good. And we can name them afterwards. Serendipitous is the sort of dean of the Pluto article on the English language Wikipedia. But we couldn't find those people in advance. And so the problem becomes, yes, you are completely beholden to highly active, passionately committed individuals, and you can't recruit them. And that it seems to me, is part of the sticking point on this design challenge of the difference that you highlighted between hierarchical management, where predictability is the beating heart of the enterprise, and how we get these systems going.
No, I completely agree, and I think that I find that across a whole range of things, which is how can you make it more systematic that you get the right people working on the right things? Are you entirely dependent on attracting people to things they might be particularly passionately interested in? And how do you know you've got the best people? And that I was having a discussion this morning with people talking about creativity and business, and the same kind of problem of how do you connect the right people together? How do you know, that you're not missing someone really important? And how do you manage their contribution? Do you see in the States or in your travels people in business who are running businesses, making money, who are using this stuff in really intelligent ways, who've got it, or do they by and large not get it?
Yes,